what would you do if everything you built with your bare hands was ripped away from you? And the man who took it laughed as he watched you limp away on a broken horse. Most people would walk off and never come back. They'd swallow the bitterness, bury the anger, and spend the rest of their lives wondering what could have been. But not every man is most people. This is the story of Elias Cole, a man who lost it all in the dust of the Texas panhandle, who rode away on a horse that could barely stand, with nothing but a name etched into his chest like a cattle brand. A name: Harlan Voss, the man who took everything from him. And years later, years of silence, of sweat, of building something the world couldn't see yet, Elias Cole came back. He didn't come back with a gun. He came back with something far more dangerous: money, patience, and a memory that never faded. Before we get to that day, the day the whole county stopped breathing for a moment, we need to go back to where it all started. We need to go back to the ranch. The year was 1883. The land west of Amarillo was the kind of country that didn't apologize for itself. Red dirt, big sky, grasslands that stretched so far you thought you could see the edge of the earth if you squinted hard enough. Elias Cole had come to that land at 22 years old, with nothing but a bedroll, a second-hand saddle, and a letter of employment from a cattle operation run by a man named Chester Briggs. Briggs was fair enough anyway, and within 2 years, Elias had gone from a hired hand to the foreman of the entire operation. He knew cattle, he understood drought, he could read a storm from 40 miles away just by the color of the clouds and the way the wind shifted. He was the kind of man the land respected. By the time he was 28, Elias had saved enough to stake his own claim. 160 acres just southwest of the Briggs spread. He called it the Dry Creek Ranch, not because there was anything romantic about it, but because there was a dry creek bed running along the south end of the property that he believed, deep in his gut, would eventually flow again if he worked the land right. He built the fences himself. He dug the well himself. He laid the first wooden boards of the main house with hands that bled for 3 days straight. And slowly, the way all real things are built, the ranch started breathing. He ran 300 head of cattle within 4 years. He had 2 hands working for him, a small bunkhouse, and a barn that smelled like hay and honest labor. And then Harlan Voss arrived in the county. Now here's where you need to pay close attention, because Harlan Voss is the kind of man who doesn't announce himself as a villain. He arrives quietly, he smiles, he buys the next round of drinks, he calls you friend before you even know his last name. Harlan Voss was what folks back then called a land speculator. He didn't raise cattle, he didn't farm, he found land that had value, or land that was about to have value. And he found ways to acquire it. Not always through honest means, but always through legal ones. That was his gift. He knew the law better than the lawyers did, and he used it the way a surgeon uses a scalpel. He arrived in Amarillo in the spring of 1889, and within 6 months, he had purchased 3 properties along the railroad corridor that was being planned west of town. But what Voss really wanted was water. The territory was dry. Everyone knew it. And whoever controlled water access controlled everything: cattle prices, crop prices, the survival of entire communities. When Voss hired a surveyor to map the underground water table across the county, the results pointed clearly in one direction: Dry Creek Ranch. Elias Cole's land sat directly above one of the deepest and most reliable aquifers in the entire Panhandle region. Voss knew it before Elias even had a clue, and Voss had a plan. Tell me, have you ever trusted someone just because they showed up at the right time with the right offer? Because that's what happened next. Harlan Voss didn't try to buy Elias out. He knew Elias wouldn't sell. A man who built something with bleeding hands doesn't part with it over a handshake and a check. No. Voss played a longer game. He introduced himself at the county fair in the summer of 1889. He was charming, well-dressed. He asked sharp questions about cattle and nodded like he understood the answers even when he didn't. He became a familiar face around the saloon, around the feed store, around the small church that sat at the crossroads near the Briggs land. And then, just when Elias was facing a rough season, after a late frost killed half his spring calves and a spate of dry weeks threatened his summer grass, Voss offered him a loan. $10,000, friendly terms, no bank involved, just two men and a handshake, backed by a piece of paper that Elias, exhausted and desperate, and too proud to ask anyone to read it carefully, signed. The paper had conditions buried in it, like rocks hidden under soft mud. Default on any payment, even one, within the loan period, and the collateral transferred immediately to Harlan Voss. The collateral was Dry Creek Ranch, all of it. 18 months later, Elias missed a payment. He didn't miss it because he was careless. He missed it because a flash flood in October swept through his south pasture and took 40 head of cattle with it. It wiped out the month's operating income in one afternoon. He planned to catch up the following month. He had done the math. It was going to be tight, but it was going to work. He never got the chance. Voss's men showed up at the ranch on a Tuesday morning in November of 1891. 3 of them. They had a county official with them, a man named Garrett, who wore his badge like it embarrassed him. They had the paperwork. They had the legal authority. And Elias Cole, who had built that ranch board by board, post by post, year by bleeding year, was told he had until sundown to clear out. He stood there in the yard he had packed down with his own boots, looking at the house he had built, at the barn, at the fence line that disappeared into the horizon. And then he looked at Harlan Voss, who had ridden up behind his men and sat on a fine bay horse watching the whole scene, with an expression that wasn't quite a smile, but wasn't far from one either. Elias didn't say a word. He walked to the small stable, put a saddle on the only horse that was still legally his, an older gray gelding named Scout, who had been carrying a limp in his left foreleg for the past month, and he rode out. Voss watched him go, and then turned his horse back toward the main house. He thought that was the end of it. Now, if you've been following along, you know we're not even halfway through this story yet, and what happens next is the part most people never see coming. Drop a comment below. Do you think Elias had a plan when he left, or was he just surviving? I want to hear what you think. And if you're not subscribed yet, listen, you're going to want to be here for the second half of this story. Hit that subscribe button right now, because the next part is where Elias Cole stops being the man who lost everything and starts becoming something else entirely. Elias rode east. He rode east because there was nothing else. No family left to speak of. His mother had passed when he was 16. His father, a bitter, hard man, had died before Elias ever made it to Texas. He had no brothers. He had a handful of acquaintances and one genuine friend, a man named Doyle Marsh, who ran a small freight operation out of Fort Worth. It took Elias 11 days to reach Fort Worth on a limping horse. He slept under the stars for most of it. He ate what he could find, bought what he could afford with the $32 he had in his coat pocket when they took the ranch. When he arrived at Doyle's yard, thin and windburned, and riding a horse that could barely lift its feet, Doyle took one look at him and asked no questions. He just said, "You eat yet today?" That was the beginning of the next chapter. Doyle Marsh was not a wealthy man, but he was a steady one. His freight operation moved goods between Fort Worth and the growing supply towns, feeding the ranches and railroad camps to the west. He needed men who understood distance, weather, and how to keep a wagon moving when everything conspired against it. Elias understood all three. Within 2 months, He was Doyle's most reliable driver. Within a year, he was running the overnight routes that nobody else wanted. Long, punishing hauls through cold nights and unpredictable weather. He didn't complain. He didn't talk much. He saved every dollar he earned that wasn't spent on food and a bunk. People who watched Elias Cole during those years described a man who seemed to be waiting for something. Not restless, patient. There's a difference. Restless men make noise. Patient men make plans. And Elias was building a plan the way he had built his first fence line, one post at a time, measured, plumb, and driven deep. The railroad changed everything. By 1894, the rail lines pushing west out of Fort Worth had created a freight demand that a small operation like Doyle's couldn't fully meet on its own. Larger companies were buying up smaller haulers, but Doyle had something they wanted: established contracts with mining operations and ranch supply accounts that were tied to his reputation, not his company name. Elias saw the opportunity before Doyle did. "You don't sell to them," Elias told him one evening over coffee in the freight yard office. "You partner with them. You keep your contracts. They provide the capital to scale up. You hold the relationships." Doyle looked at him for a long moment. "When did you become a businessman?" Elias didn't answer. He had been thinking about Harlan Voss for 3 years. And in thinking about Voss, he had studied how Voss operated. He had, without realizing it, learned the language of capital, leverage, and contract structure. The same language that had been used to take everything from him. Now, he intended to speak it fluently. The partnership deal Doyle negotiated, with significant guidance from Elias, gave them a 40% equity stake in the expanded operation and cash liquidity that Doyle had never seen in his life. Elias took a smaller cut on paper. What he took in reality was something more valuable: the relationships with the railroad buyers, the trust of the supply operations, and the experience of watching how large-scale land and infrastructure deals got structured. He was 34 years old. He had lost his ranch at 29. In the 5 years between those two moments, he had gone from a broke, limping figure riding into Fort Worth on a broken horse to a man with capital, connections, and something sharp and patient burning behind his eyes. He had one more step before he was ready. The aquifer. Elias had never stopped thinking about the water. He had never stopped wondering whether Voss had discovered something about the land that he hadn't known. And in 1896, he hired the same kind of surveyor Voss had used, a hydrologist out of Kansas City who specialized in underground water mapping, and had the man quietly survey the entire Dry Creek area. The report confirmed what he had suspected. The aquifer beneath his old ranch was extraordinary, and in the years since Voss had taken the property, he had done essentially nothing to develop it. Voss had acquired the land for its future value, but future value requires patience to realize. And Voss, it turned out, was better at taking things than he was at building them. The ranch had been running at minimal capacity under Voss's management. The cattle operation was a fraction of what Elias had built. The well Elias had dug was the only water infrastructure on the property. Voss had always planned to sell to a larger buyer when the timing was right. The timing, Elias decided, was going to be right very soon. Here's the part that separates this story from a simple tale of revenge. Elias didn't want the ranch back out of anger. He had moved past anger somewhere in the middle of the Texas plains during those 11 cold nights riding east on a limping horse. What he wanted was something harder to name: a restoration, not of the land, but of the truth. The truth that what he had built had value, that it had been taken through manipulation rather than merit, and that the world should know the difference. But he also understood that the world only respects certain languages, and capital was the most fluent of them. In the fall of 1897, Elias Cole, in partnership with Doyle Marsh and a Fort Worth investor named Franklin Hale, who had been watching Elias's instincts for 2 years, made a formal offer to purchase Dry Creek Ranch and the surrounding parcels that Voss had acquired over the years. The offer was substantial, fair market value, plus a premium that reflected the aquifer access. Voss received it through his attorney and initially declined. What happened next is the kind of thing that makes a story worth telling. Elias expected the refusal. He had planned for it. Through the same network of railroad contacts and freight relationships he had spent 5 years building, Elias quietly approached the 3 largest cattle operations in the Panhandle, operations that were dealing with water scarcity and needed aquifer access to survive the coming decade of growth. He offered them a consortium arrangement. If they pooled resources and came in behind Elias's offer as co-investors, they would each get guaranteed water access agreements once the aquifer was developed. The total capital assembled was more than 3 times Voss's asking price. When Voss's attorney received the revised offer and understood that the consortium behind it represented effectively every major cattle interest in the region, there was no room to negotiate. Refusing meant being isolated from the water infrastructure that was about to become the backbone of the entire Panhandle economy. Harlan Voss signed the transfer documents on a Thursday in March of 1898. Do you want to know what the day looked like? Elias drove out to the ranch with Doyle and Franklin Hale in a hired buggy. They arrived in the late morning. The sky was that particular blue that only exists in the Texas Panhandle in early spring. So clear and so deep, it feels like you could fall up into it. The county recorder came out to formalize the transfer. It was done in the yard, just outside the main house. The same yard where Elias had stood 6 years earlier, listening to men tell him he had until sundown to leave. Harlan Voss wasn't present. He had sent his attorney instead. Whether Voss stayed away out of pride or shame, nobody knew. Elias didn't ask. After the papers were signed, Elias walked alone to the south end of the property where the Dry Creek bed ran. He stood there for a while, looking at the ground. The creek was still dry. It would be dry for another 2 seasons before the aquifer work they planned would change the water table enough to feed it. But he knew it would flow. He had always known. Doyle came and stood beside him after a few minutes. "How does it feel?" Doyle asked. Elias looked at the dry creek for a long moment. "Like the right kind of quiet," he said. The Dry Creek Ranch under Elias Cole's second ownership became one of the most productive water access operations in the entire Panhandle. Within 5 years, the aquifer development had changed land values for 20 miles in every direction. The cattle consortium that had backed his purchase multiplied their investment several times over. The creek, the Dry Creek that Elias had always believed in, began running water in the summer of 1900. Steady, clear, cold water, right where he had always said it would be. Elias never built a monument. He never gave a speech. He never told the story of what Voss had done to him in any public forum. He didn't need to. The land told it for him. Harlan Voss left the county sometime around 1901. Nobody paid much attention to where he went. What Elias Cole's story teaches us isn't really about revenge. It isn't even about land, or water, or money. It's about the specific kind of patience that looks like defeat to everyone watching from the outside. The kind of patience that requires you to ride away from everything you built on a broken horse with $32 in your coat and still believe, deep in the part of you that doesn't negotiate with despair, that you are not finished. Most people quit at the moment it looks like quitting makes sense. Elias Cole quit nothing. He just changed his timeline. And when he walked back into that yard, not as the man who had been driven out, but as the man who now owned every post and plank and inch of red Texas dirt on that property, the land recognized him. It always does. This story was brought to life through artificial intelligence, a creative reconstruction built to entertain, inspire, and carry the spirit of the American frontier into your screen. The characters, events, and specific details presented here are works of fiction crafted with care by independent creators. For accurate historical accounts of the Wild West era, land rights history, and frontier life, we encourage you to explore certified academic sources, libraries, and historical archives. The past deserves both great stories and great scholarship, and we hope this gave you a little of the first.